Greetings brothers and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about a certain subject of why Warhammer 40k fans exaggerate the setting. Now of course the inspiration of this subject, or aka the idea that I stole, is from Gam's video, but I wanted to add a little bit more of my personal experience because topics like these as such that happened before, it's even happening even today, which is still occurring as we speak. Now, talking about a little bit more of myself, it's pretty much straightforward, like I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention this again if anybody hasn't watched my previous videos before. So, started in 8th edition, and as I wanted to join the hobby, asked some friends, some co-workers, and then talking about like the Warhammer 40k universe, and they always talk about these like insane situations or insane scenarios, like stories that are being, like in hindsight, very overfluffed to the fucking death. Like, it can be either Horus Heresy or Warhammer 40k, but it's always subjects like these, like, the Space Marines that are the indomitable spirit of humanity, and they're, like, so unstoppable they can never be defeated. Like, having one Marine into one town can destroy the whole city itself, and all that shenanigans. Just because they're bigger, faster, and taller, and all that. And then you have the Orcs, where they're just talking about, like, they're the most comedic faction, and they always tell you about the funniest shit they do, instead of just talking about, like, how threatening they are. Like, they do tell you they're threatening, but most of the time they, when I was still around in 8th edition, they always say about, like, the dumb shit they talk about, the fun shit they always talk about. So it's never about, like, they're actually fucking deadly, all that shit. And obviously the Necrons, same thing more or less with the Orcs, but it's always like, dude, look at this fucking massive construction they have where they could just press a button on the map and destroy a whole continent in the solar exilio or some shit. And all other shit, like, they're using like the katanas, the pokeballs, and all that. Anyways, my point is, like, it all came from memes and lore channels that I used to watch, and went from books and audiobooks, and then slowly getting into the Horus Heresy that took me 3 years, and then I'm never doing it again. And then when it came to my army build, it was a little bit on Primaris first, and then mainly slowly went to Firstborn. And I've talked to new players and old players of 40k, and I've been through a lot. So whenever I talk about 40k subjects, I ain't speaking out of my ass. I've seen the downfall of 8th edition, and it's still going, and I don't think they have improved ever since. Sure, if you want to try to like nitpick and be like, yeah, there's some actually good errors in this area of during the current editions that happened previously, but at the same time doesn't really just change the whole subject at all. So, seeing all of these, and then I just had some guidance at the start of 8th edition, and then at some point, I was just able to handle myself. Why? Because I had a good start, and then I just moved on by myself and did the rest myself. Good example is, during the Horus Heresy for 3 fucking years. You know what's more annoying with this video? It's this. You can't escape me! Welcome to the Hoppeldas Legion, motherfucker! I have a long range of options for you guys you can support me in. Patreon, Ko-Fi, and YouTube memberships. And from your support, it will make me more committed to do more videos. There's my stuff. They're in the video descriptions or my main channel. Might as well join the cause and be part of the Legion, brother. And to wipe off the degeneracy off this planet. That is all for this advertisement, even though you skipped it, you fucking heretic. And now, let's get back to the video. But just to show that whole idea of my personal experience, but the main point is that, okay, where did you get this main idea about Warhammer 40,000? It usually comes from your friends, it usually comes from your co-workers, it usually comes from someone who's really invested into Warhammer 40k. So the ones, they want you to get into a hobby, or you're doing it myself. I've done it myself plenty of times at the early of 8th edition and a little bit of 9th edition, where, understandably, you just get a little bit excited and you want people to get into the hobby. So thus, you're just talking about like some insane stories, or you're just talking about like cool things that happen in the setting and all that. And let's just say for a specific scenario, when you're getting into the hobby, or you're just very curious of your hobby, you just ask your friend of like, what is Warhammer 40,000? And obviously the man's is just being illuminated to the heavens above while playing against this paradise. And his eyes are so glowing, he's like, damn, alright, I'll tell you about Warhammer 40,000. It is like the most exaggerated things, as they usually list on other things. It's like, yeah, Warhammer 40,000, dude, it's like the grimdark universe that is just so fucking over-exaggerated to the point that it's just so funny. Or in the grim darkness of the far future where everything is just so messed up where there's no such thing as human life or value, whatever you want to put it. But the point is just make it a little bit exaggeration. Now, of course, you might get hooked in, you ask maybe a couple of questions, you get more invested, and then let's just say later on, as you get invested into the universe of Warhammer 40,000, you start to ask questions of doing like crossovers of other universes, and then you maybe probably ask your friend or you look it up yourself or maybe misread a little bit from the wiki or the wiki light itself. And it's always this case of, a space marine can destroy Star Wars because they're bigger, better, and stronger. And if nothing else defeats it, thus this just used in Exterminatus, which is usually the fucking 40K's fans excuse. What is another example? Like Master Chief versus Space Marine, even though they're completely different, they have different certain purposes and all that. But as a 40K fan, they always want to put the Space Marine. Why? Because they're bigger and they're stronger, they have more organs, and they're ready for battle. Disregarding completely about Master Chief or anything like that, of what his unique abilities is. Now, just giving you that whole scenario of what, how people get hooked into Warhammer 40K universe. Now, is this really the main problem when it comes to it? In my personal opinion, yes. You exaggerate in a setting that it gets a bit of lies and stretching the truth a little bit after reading the wiki or just completely bullshitting just to get your friend into the hobby. Now, but I would say it is not really intentional. So, it is a problem, but these fans who do this are not really intentional because, they really mean good to get someone into the hobby that they clearly enjoy and that wants to get people into the hobby and all that. Now, but then again, that type of view of trying to exaggerate the setting and just to get the person into it is really just a short-term goal, not a long-term goal, because I've witnessed this myself where I talk about 40K and all that. And now when I talk about 40K, it's a little bit much more streamlined and much better than what I used to do before. But what I've witnessed most of the time when, 40K fans or people who exaggerate 40K lore, they really want to hype someone to get into a hobby, they usually last about a month, more or less, or 2 months, until they get entirely bored and then they just drop it. Or they're either going through briefly from the wiki and hearing some exaggerated stories, but they maybe just found out that it's not that exaggerated, or the lore seems cool, but after that they're just gonna get bored and move on to the next thing. And now that is quite common when it comes to casuals, or the proper term is tourist. They hop on, they think these things are cool, and then they just hop off. And this is why I've mentioned many times in my previous videos, if you're really serious, then get into the codexes, which is my recommendation. Either hard copies or digital, but usually I recommend digital. But yeah, no, it gets back to my point is these, tourists that they come in and talking about the hobby and all that, or just testing the hobby and all that. Now, for tourists that come into the hobby is not really an issue unless the tourists pretending they know what Warhammer 40K is and then trying to direct where the setting should be going. That would be an issue. But most of the time, what I've witnessed from my experience at the very least, is that most of the time, tourists will just come in, chill, they like a product or something, and then they just get out. Or they see it as a short-term dopamine dosage, so they can get their hype up, and then they just move on to the next one. Now, novels tend to be a secondary thing because they tell you about the stories, they're more of the setting, and now, even with codexes, I might have to emphasize about a point called hyperbole, which is just a figure of speech that is not usually meant to be taken seriously. Now, the good example that I have is about the Terminators. I love some Terminators. Let's read a short story about the Terminators, which, well, is more of a description, but yeah, you know. Terminators are truly amongst the greatest heroes of mankind. Bold warriors in whom the indefectible heroism of a space marine is combined with the terrible weaponry and indomitable mass of tactical dreadnought armor. No foe is safe from the Terminator assault, not a horde of orcs nor tyrannid bio monstrosity or a chaos titan. Terminators are nearly invincible, unstoppable, and they never yield. Now, for those who already know about the first Tyrannic War in the 10th edition trailer where the Tyrannid just rips that Terminator apart, that is not really the case. I will see this a little bit differently when I read stuff like this, because when it comes to like faction codexes, it's usually more of a marketing tool. Like why is that the case? Well, it's because when you enter into these faction books, which are codexes, they try to sell you why this army is the greatest and why you should run it. And this is something that I run at the beginning of this codexes. Like, then again, when you read something like this and you go through the story talking about Terminators doing well on one hand and then the Gene Stealers just rip them apart like it's nothing, you understand it is written in hyperbole. Does that mean fucking Terminators are useless? No. Okay, whatever. But the enemy level threat may be greater than them, which they will get obliterated, but they're not invincible. And that's the whole point of hyperbole. And this is roughly what I've mentioned before. And that is what I've talked about 40k YouTubers, and of course, VTubers that come along with it. Thank you, Breaky, for sending another second video to bring more VTubers in. We are so fucked. Now, I have to say this because it's YouTube and people are special. Of course, there are some fucking YouTubers that have good intentions and do a good job. And some others do the opposite and shill the fucking product out of it. This is what I'm mainly hitting. Then again, there are two things as well when it comes to like fans or types of YouTuber channels and all that. It's either tribalism or a more accurate description is an echo chamber, where it's all about to play along, to get along, the need of feeling to be accepted, to be part of the group, where, when someone just disagrees onto another guy, they have 10 friends supporting him in order to defeat that one guy. I'm definitely not speaking about myself again. Then again, it's not really surprising when it comes to 40k fans to be such a echo chamber, because to a certain extent they think Warhammer 40,000 can beat any other universe because exterminators or dumb shit. They're bigger, they're better, so thus they win. Like, it's not that hard. Or they have the memes to encourage shit like the Baneblazer Scout Tank, the Krieg Shovels, the Emperor TTS, and there's a custodian named Kitten, and there's the 3 fucking, JoJo Bizarre Adventures Part 2 where they become oily, masculine men. I know where it's from, but let me have it. Let me have this joke for once. Now then again, why is this the case? Well, it's because people don't like being rejected or hear negative opinions, aka fucking criticisms. Thus, they want to hear what they like to hear and to play along to get along. But the most common things that I've shown before in other videos, there is a pattern sign when a 40k channel or other VTuber 40k channel that tends to do these types of things. Like, for example, they usually hype up the product, like how everything is good, and they never criticize about the product or the company. Or, if they do, they usually softball it because that is universally agreed upon. Or they just avoid the whole controversy and just do it for laughs and entertainment. Now the question is, why would they do this? Well, it's quite simple. They don't want to see the backlash. They don't want to lose a subscription because they build it up like it's their bank account. The bigger the fucking fan base, the bigger the viewers, the more money you get, and all that, right? Now, that is understandable if you're running a business and don't want your audience to go away of what you gathered so far. Now, for me, if you've been here for a very long time, well, you will understand I have quite a different philosophy, which I'll explain to the newcomers who never watched me before and think I'm a complete asshole, or just a rambling perturabo is either one of those, which both of them are quite funny. But I have a little bit of different philosophy. I'm here to give you the truth with the best of my ability. I'll be here and be honest while I say things as it is without beating around the bush. So, quite straightforward and blunt you can say as well, since my aura scares the VTubers themselves and hide in their little cave along with their fucking sip parasites. So, the way I value this is how I value a friend. I'm here to give him the respect that he deserves, to give him the truth and go straight to the point. Like, I will give you the truth that you do not want to hear because I'm your real friend who cares about you. Now, if I was a fake person or someone who wants to play along to get along, I will just lie. I will stroke your ego. I will just give you something that you just want to hear, just to be accepted by you. It's all play along to get along. Yes, GW is the best product, and the 10th edition was so good, while the previous editions were just so bad and complicated. Now, gonna hit my final point as well, which relates to many other things that I've previously mentioned before, and it's that people don't read the books themselves. Like, they watch YouTube videos and then they base their YouTube videos like it's their fucking gospel. And people don't check it themselves, and that's why you have people who says, oh, you know, they've read the fucking codexes, they've read the books and all that. Meanwhile, I have seen nothing where they don't say, like, you know, oh, I checked it myself, this guy seems legit, or this guy seems legit. Most of the time, it comes with an echo chamber where it's just to play along to get along. But it goes back to, you know, they don't usually check themselves the books and just fact check it itself. So thus, it really muddies the water about the lore in the 40k universe. Then again, 40k is not canon, but as you know by now, this is always the sake of argument. Honestly, again, you can go get them digitally or get a second-hand copy when it comes to books or novels or codexes or whatever, or your friend George might have some spare books that he can give you for free. So, to wrap this up, in conclusion, do your fucking homework and stop taking lore videos like it's your holy Bible. When you read it yourself, you know what you're talking about, you know what other YouTubers are either legit or not, and you're already at the top 1% compared to the other 99% of 40k fans that don't even bother looking into 40k lore or looking into codexes. And sure, you know, there's some lore channels they do like a much more service to the lore and give a much more respect, but most of the time, in my experience, man, like, that is not really the case. Most of the time, they want to do some goofs and laughs, but exaggerate the lore to the point that it becomes very off-putting and unreliable when it comes to, like, being accurate to the lore. Then again, 40k is not canon. That is all for this video. You can check me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, and YouTube memberships. You can check me on Discord or YouTube's community page if you're wanting any updates. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye, my brothers, and take care. Rise up in the morning sun.